following talk is a TED-style talk of new material, so it's a bit of a testing ground. Much was learned on what to do differently from this. So here we go, the raw version. From anxiety to flow. Want to move towards. So the belief with flow is you don't get what you want in life, you get what your unconscious stuff creates. So repeat patterns, then that's why we get repeat things. So I'm going to take you on that journey. For me, it started first year at university at Lincoln, and 17-year-old kid, and I was very naive, wasn't one of the cool kids, and was looking around in the halls of residence away from home. What do people think? Am I going to be accepted? Are people going to like me? All of those things. And then exams. Am I going to pass exams? That was going crazy in my head, and got to the stage where I hadn't slept for 2 nights. I was just a wreck, emotional wreck. I went to a counsellor and found there was a term called anxiety that took a lot of weight off my shoulders, knowing that I wasn't going completely mad. The first year was a struggle with exams and trying to work out what life was about. But the next year, I did a course by John Kehoe, which was a mind power course about thinking positive, and it was amazing. It gave me a vision of what one day I might want to do, is be a leader and write about this area. And then I told my friends I wanted to be a world leader in motivation. What do you think they said?
Get real crazy.
Yeah. So that just shattering at the time as a person who had a lot of self-doubt, low self-esteem and anxiety. But the course was amazing. It taught me positive thinking, so I turned everything into a positive in the head, and for 10 years had reasonable success with certain repeat patterns of failure that occurred. And then after that, on a retreat, and realised that because I was turning everything into a positive in the head, I didn't know that I was suppressing anger. And I was disowning anything that was negative. So I had this huge anger, which, because I was so in the head and disconnected from really reality, that I then discovered amazing anger and all sorts of stuff. And that was the start of my passion around learning emotional fitness and understanding everything that is, and every possible technique there is about connecting emotionally and understanding. The journey started living in Sydney all those years ago, and I went to a men's anger group. A lot of the people there were there because police sent them to deal with anger. But picture this, a whole group of men trying to talk about their feelings, and the front, a table with a baseball bat and a punching bag. And what we did is we had to say how we feel. And it was, I clearly remember this, because my boss, at the time I was a sales manager of a company in Sydney, had yelled at me that day, and I said, I'm feeling angry. You had to hit with a baseball bat, hit the punching bag and let out your anger and say, and it was just all the stuff. It was just amazing, and it just feels unreal reenacting it now with the feelings that are going through our body. But we all did that to connect emotionally, to be real emotionally, and try and open up the anger that had been suppressed and the energy that is all blocked. So it was an amazing start of that journey. Fast forward you to some years later, and discovered in flow, or this term inner flow, which is about peak performance. At times it had elite performance in sport, but never consistently, because it was the self-doubt that I never knew was there because I was so in the head. And then by starting to learn the techniques of tuning in and letting out emotions, started to get consistency, because flow is about consistency between the head, the heart and emotions, and if you get the link and you get the togetherness, then you become a weapon, so to speak, in sport. So the thing that I started to notice from having huge self-doubt that I didn't know was there originally, because I was up here and Mr. Positive, real low self-esteem, a whole lot of emotional stuff here that meant that I'd have a positive self-esteem, but never really had a high self-esteem when you get into emotions and start tuning in. So the journey then was about these techniques to let out emotions, connect, and one's emotional surfing, where you actually feel the emotion and identify it and then integrate it. And another one's unblocking, where you actually go down and drop into the emotion and just let it out, whether that be anger, you let that out and you do it by yourself. It's like doing years of psychotherapy, because emotions and emotional blocks are like icebergs. We have them all hidden away in our unconscious. They come up and then we feel negative. And of course, emotions, don't want them. We suppress them and the iceberg goes under the surface so we don't feel that negative again. But the emotion unblocking is about using the iceberg as it comes to the surface and asking where it's coming from and dropping down and letting out the emotion, asking where it's coming from, letting out until you get to the bottom. If you melt the whole iceberg, it's like doing years of psychotherapy, you get rid of that whole block. So that's been the major technique which helped me feel okay about myself. I still don't necessarily have a great self-esteem, but a whole different presence about myself, because it's about de-triggering these different things. Key thing is in sport, there's been a real notice recently, as I've grown to be okay with who I am, then in sport, because I play a lot of tennis and I'm accredited in the US as a professional coach, but I was never a great player because I never had coaching. So there's always this doubt. People see this tennis coach, he's not a great player. But over the years, I've improved my own game and at times played well. But more recently now, the national rankings climbed up significantly in the last year. And what a feeling, because previously under pressure of an important match, there was this sabotage, things would go a bit wrong. But now, just more recently, as I've started to understand and get a bit more consistency in the flow, there's been a more effortless and just higher performance in life, which is something you cannot put a price on. The feeling inside, having always had massive self-doubt and at times real anxiety and even depression, then the feeling of free emotion and emotional fitness is something that you can never put a price on, and yeah, it's very empowering. So to start concluding, the key that for me has been tuning into the inside. There's the inner world, or talk about the inner game, and then there's the outer game. The outer game is stuff that happens outside you. Maybe it's the family's expectations. It may be society say, oh, you've got to do this by a certain age. So if you're living your life by outer expectations, then that's when stress and more anxiety. But if you learn to de-trigger and tune in and follow your heart and be in tune, then that's when the flow can happen, because there's synchronicity and so forth. So the key for me has been to learn, and I certainly don't know the answers. It's a journey, and it's a hell of a journey for me so far, and I'm not quite sure what the next chapter holds, but that's the fun of the journey, to see what's around the corner and live on the edge. So thank you for sharing my story. Any questions? Scared of this weirdo on stage that throws his arms around?
Sorry, you mentioned that you worked in Sydney for a while, is that right?
Yeah.
So I assume you lived in Sydney for a while as well. I hope it's not too much of a random question, but I'm wondering, did you notice a difference in emotional culture in Sydney versus Auckland in the people?
A lot of intensity, and yeah, business is really high intensity, and yeah, it's much more laid back in New Zealand. So yeah, but an amazing city, just the buzz and yeah.
Why did you go to that anger management? You weren't sent there by the police, you went there voluntarily?
Because, as I said at the start, I'd always had this dream that one day I'd be a well-known in my field as an expert, And so I knew that emotions was my journey, and to become an expert in emotions, I had to start feeling them and start really understanding what it was about. And it wasn't actually fun going through the whole experience of, as you may have seen when I've reenacted it before, the whole feeling of anger coming up and is just not a whole lot of fun. But it was part of healing the stuff that I unknowingly had created and so it was just the journey to really heal old stuff, and I got a lot out of it, even though it's pretty weird thinking back on what we did, but that having de-triggered a lot of the stuff in association with just using the technique by myself over the years, the story is that's just what it is. Somebody once said, you're really open with sharing this sort of stuff, and that's just because I don't have any real emotion attached to it. Like I always used to be. I always used to be so concerned about what everyone else was thinking around me and so forth. But these days I'm still really aware of what people and still pretty sensitive, but more and more I did have a story I was going to share from the plane yesterday, but and this is other questions about that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're next.
Yeah. Just when you recognize your anger, when you look at the inside in your emotion, what happened? So did you go through find why you get angry, or?
Would you like a technique?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you feel an emotion, the key is to be okay with emotion. I mean, I was unconsciously taught by my father. He never showed any emotion. So I just assumed emotions are bad. So I had all these beliefs. So for me, in the tennis court, I show emotions and unleash. And that's a safe place. Still in public, I wouldn't probably show much emotion. But it's, getting to your answer to your question, it's around just being aware of if you feel an emotion, and you can acknowledge it and you can label it. There's a combination of different techniques you can use to give it validity, if I can pronounce the word, and just honour emotions instead of, because society generally teaches us you have to be in this positive frame, otherwise you go to the doctor and get antidepressants. Society doesn't tend to teach us these techniques for how to deal with non-positive emotions, and that's what the techniques I've learned are. They're called an emotional fitness workout, just so that you can have ways. And so basically it's awareness is the starting point, feeling, and then you can, yeah. Perhaps I'll give everyone a practical example. It's called emotion surfing. It was developed by Ralph Kushler, who's been on the Oprah Winfrey show as a US guy who's the expert in emotions. His technique is emotional surfing. So whenever you feel a non-positive emotion, you just label it, you just feel what it is, then you, about 20 seconds later, ask yourself, can I be with that? And then often those negative emotions gets integrated into your system, so it sort of improves your resilience. So you repeat that again, just 2 simple steps. You label and identify what your emotions are that you are feeling, and then just say, can I be with it? And you just repeat the emotion surfing until all the negative emotions you're feeling can be integrated. It builds up your emotional fitness, your resilience to be able to handle. And just like any muscle in your body, if you don't improve your fitness, then you're just in one certain range. So hopefully that explains.
So it's not valuable to go back deeper towards establishing what the cause of that emotion was and try to address that? There's not a lot of value in doing it?
You can, and I've done a lot through the emotion unblocking technique, which is the other one I briefly touched on. And that's where when I'm feeling sort of anger, or I'd even do it when in the car, or road rage, then I ask where it's coming from and drop into the feeling. And for me, it was, when anger was at the surface, I would go into it and ask where it's coming from, drop down into the unconscious attached emotion, and it kept coming up that my dad was always there, but he never showed me any emotion, and so I felt unloved. So for years I was letting out all this stuff around anger there, which was completely unrelated to the road rage or whatever happened at the surface of the iceberg. But if you do this and dig out, you just cleanse a whole lot of old stuff. The key with that technique is you don't need to intellectualise it. It's a form of healing. Just release the emotions and clear them out. Any other?
Have you ever considered that anger is not even yours, or not even the client's anger? So they feel it, they live it, but it's not theirs. What I mean, for example, when you enter a room and there was some very annoying situation before you entered, but you are not aware of that, you just go in and suddenly you start to feel so angry, but nothing happened to you, and you just tap into that field of energy.
Well, I certainly believe...
You live through anger or someone else's anger, and you want to manage it by do something, but it's not yours. So
there's certainly a lot of research around consciousness, and everything's connected. There's a scientist that's proven that. So you pick up energy from other people, and you can be triggered, certainly. And I don't claim to know all the answers, but my answer to what you're saying is that for me, emotions have been really real, and it's been connecting with them being real and letting them out. So I own them, and I'm accepting it's okay to be angry. And as I've accepted and done more work on this, I'm less and less angry because I've improved my range of fitness, and I'm just okay with who I am. So it's a big shift from thinking like modelling my dad as a little kid who doesn't show emotion, so that maybe that's how I have to be. So one.
Have you read the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman?
Yeah.
It's got a lot of interesting stuff.
Great, are you a big fan of it?
Oh, yeah, I've read it a few times.
Yeah. The difference between emotional intelligence and emotional fitness. Fitness is, good emotional fitness means that whatever your desire is, you can get that through being fit enough to have not the blocks. Whereas emotional intelligence is a bit different, but yeah, it's all good stuff.
It's more the theory.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be more questions, but yeah, feel free afterwards to grab
All right.
Robert and ask for questions. But we'll go on to the next speaker. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.